you work across the street, so.
Hi, everybody.
Mr.
Dude, my hair's getting way too long. It's doing that 90s emo thing. I'm just going to start covering like one eye.
Oh, my.
Being all depressed and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, the problems of having a problem with the way your hair is. I remember that.
Oh, my bad. You don't have that problem, Damien.
Not at all. Not at all. Why are you asking? No comb right here. I don't know why you guys don't shave it off. That's what I did for the pandemic. That's why I'm this way. Why did you guys think I was this way?
No other reason.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Is shaving your head going to help with the pandemic?
That's what I've been told. That's the only thing I've been told. Maybe I don't know enough about it. So we are live.
Like right now?
Right now.
Oh, so I shouldn't swear.
You can swear. In fact, it'll be a lot funner if you swear. I swear to you.
Do you promise?
Well, can't promise anything. Things can change. So, did I understand this right? Is the lockdown in Florida going to end on the 5th, on the 1st? Are we like Georgia? Or did I hear that wrong? Anybody know?
Georgia started their partial opening, and I think we're doing a partial opening pretty soon.
Interesting. All right. And like Georgia, only the essentials, gyms, strip joints, and other things, I believe. Maybe I got that wrong. Maybe I was reading some other news outlet. Or did I get that right? I get that right? Well, I'm hearing from the silence that I get that right.
Yeah, I think gyms are part of phase 1, which I'm not quite understanding. But
yes. Any place that it's close by, and bowling rinks, bars, any place where you're not near anybody or sweating. That's my understanding of the requirements.
Although I did see one Georgia gym on TV, they kind of set up kind of these boundaries around the benches and whatnot.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, if they let in a limited number of customers, I can see how it's doable.
That's the other thing. How about you guys? I mean, I was talking to different people, and I never put into my head. It never fit in my head. By the way, Jeremy, you're in charge here. You tell us when we start. But this is not technically related. But one of the things that people are going to stop talking about is that certain people are just simply not going to come into work. Okay, work is open. Everybody come back in, but listen, I can't. I got kids, or I got this and the other. So it seems to be it's going to be slowly coming in. And I got a friend of mine who works in an insurance company, and they've already thought about this, and they will say that certain people will be able to work from home the whole time out of the necessity or requirements. And the ones who can't will come in, say, a few Mondays and Tuesdays and a few Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then, every so often switch on Fridays.
My company is doing too, yeah. Yeah, my insurance is also an insurance, and they're saying they're not going to force anybody. This is 700 people.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But is there anybody who needs to be essentially there? My friend, for
Nobody.
some reason, because of, Tito, with insurance, there's a lot of times the paperwork is just sitting there, and it hasn't been digitized. And so therefore someone has to come in to put away, pull in.
Funny enough, the only ones that really need to be there or look for that in person are the salespeople.
Right.
But that's
and they're going to have a hard time.
It is a hard time because, trying to get into that C-level conversation, it's not the same.
It's a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zoom calls. And yeah. As long as you're not an idiot and you don't make the Zoom calls out of your garage, you'll be fine.
Time to time.
Yes. Because of my this is a virtual background, by the way. I'm not actually in my garage. I'm in my luxury home in my cabin.
We know.
But I thought this was hilarious.
You're in your Paris home, right?
That's what it is.
Because you're quarantining in your Paris home, right?
Yeah, I mean, any other time. I remember I had a good friend of mine whose dream was to do it like his cousin. His cousin was working for Motorola back in the 90s, and Motorola said, everybody work from home. And his cousin goes, interesting. My home is Argentina. And so he was making Motorola money, Motorola San Francisco money, and he was living in Argentina. So he was living the life. So yeah.
Not a bad plan.
Indeed.
Live from a garage.
Yes. Thank you. You can tell it's a garage, didn't you?
I can wait for you to say, like, what's that movie, Wedding Crashers? Ma! The meatloaf!
Yeah, Mom, shut up, Mom. Shut up. Do this. So, I love it.
I love Will Ferrell.
I love that movie is the best.
You know, Jeremy, you missed it was actually, who was it? It's not here. Oh, yes, Larry was talking about the store and Vue store, right, Larry? Can you repeat what you just said about what you were trying to learn?
Sure. Yeah. Over the last couple of months, I'm finally diving into the front end, and I chose to go the Vue route. So I incorporated Vuex into the front, but I feel a little bad because everything on the back end is tested. I have unit tests. I have no idea what I'm doing on the front end yet with testing. So I just started taking a Udemy course, and coming up on my next session is testing of the Vuex store. So I'm really looking forward to it. Good timing.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Someone was just talking to me about they're picking up Vue, and they were wondering when's the right time to pick up a Vuex. And the answer is as soon as possible, right? Especially if you're planning on getting the application to grow. The sooner you put it in, the better. As soon as you have to pass down data from parent to child to grandparent, you've gone too far. You need Vuex for that because it's going to only grow in complexity. And if those relationships change in any shape, way, and form, it all gets out there. So Vuex is very easily testable, as the TheVueGuy is going to show us. You can choose your own flavor too. If you use the Vue CLI to set things up, I think you can choose between Jest and Mocha. So, choose your own flavor. What are you using on the back end to do your testing?
PHP unit.
Okay. So I think I personally don't do a lot of testing because I like to live dangerously.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to this talk as well.
So macho.
Test in production.
That's
Exactly.
what it is.
Let my customers find it. That's good.
We'll do it. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
I want to go back to the days of cowboy coding, right? Like I'm learning GridSim and trying to get all of my WordPress sites over to a static site. And I miss the days of just like download from the FTP, open the file straight from there, and then saving and hoping everything is fine.
Download, no SSH, and then start VI right there on the file on production. Come on now.
I open up FileZilla and right-click, open an editor, and I'm done.
I used to code a lot in just recently, just up to a few years ago. I coded in software called Coda, where it's like a text editor and an FTP in
I remember
one.
that.
So you're writing your files and you're saving them right to the server. It's like it has a
Coda.
Like Panic software?
2007.
Panic software. Coda 2.
Oh man, I remember those days.
Yeah,
Those were dangerous times. The Wild Wild West is an understatement for. Why did this go wrong?
So different than how we live now. Yeah.
Why was that ever an acceptable thing to do?
The editing function.
Because it was the only thing to do. I remember doing the exact same thing with Dreamweaver.
We were figuring things out. The web was very different back then. The way I see it, we used to create solutions. We used to write everything ourselves, essentially, for the most part. But now I feel like I'm almost just grabbing everyone else's solutions and just gluing them together. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, it's 90% of what we do, right?
It's mainly why I don't use Bootstrap. Because I don't like the decisions they've made on stuff. I want to create my own HTML and CSS, the smaller and lighter. Like there was a phase where it's like I was trying to get rid of every single div and trying to do everything with as minimal markup as possible. And then with the responsive design, it's like, okay, this div is strictly for layout, and this div is for the content in itself. So I'm not averse to having an extra div or two, but I definitely don't like the indentation.
My front end developer, she just started developing her own front end framework. That's
cool.
just the way she thinks. So.
If she'd be interested in giving a talk, I know a front-end meetup group that would be, dying for a talk, or she could more than welcome to talk to it here. Just because this is JavaScript doesn't mean it's cut off from that topic.
Yeah.
We had actually a programmer at where I worked where he was required to do absolutely everything without a library, which reminds me of my Microsoft days. And the reason why is that he was creating software that they were going to sell. And they were just the owner was just scared to death about any licenses. And he didn't understand them. That's why. And so he literally had paid this guy for over a year to recreate what, he could have done in a couple of weeks in Bootstrap or some of the other libraries, building on top of, standing on the shoulders of giants. But, the requirements were absolutely everything from scratch. At Microsoft, we had the same thing. The only thing we were allowed to use was jQuery. And every single thing, and Bootstrap was around back then, and we were not allowed to use Bootstrap. We were not allowed to use we had to build our own carousels or anything like that by ourselves, because it's just Microsoft could not deal with, they could easily be, sued for $30 million or something like that with no problem.
How long ago?
Talking about Microsoft, see, all I have to do is just simply mention Microsoft, and all of a sudden, some kind of Microsoft employees will simply show up here. Is that right, Seth? I did not invite one of the most important people in the Microsoft environment. Is just mentioning Microsoft and mentioning working there, and there's Cecil to correct me on everything I say. How are you, my friend?
Hey man, how you doing? How's everything?
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Cecil. You guys don't know go for it.
No, I was just gonna say I was just going for a run, and it popped up on my phone. I was like, oh, let me join the meeting really quick. I didn't want to miss anything.
Isn't this amazing, Cecil? What I find amazing is, for example, I used to be, when I was living in San Francisco, working at Microsoft. I was able to go to these amazing meetups, and I missed them. And then a couple of months ago, I realized, oh my God, I can instantly go to them right now because all of them are virtual. So you can instantly go with them as you take a run, as you're driving home from work, or if you do happen to have to do that. It's just magical. I mean, I now can go to every single meetup I wanted to in Miami and top of Naples or San Francisco or New York. This is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I only have a few minutes, but I figured I would pop in, say hi to you and Jeremy, and got surprised that a couple of other friends are here as well. So
yeah. We've got a couple of people. I've been promoting this through Cognizant Soft Vision. We got a couple of my coworkers from out of town. I think we got North Carolina up in here. Hello, Roshni.
Nice.
Hi.
So definitely hitting the mark. There's a couple of places I've been promoting this to, different Slack channels that I've been invited to recently. I've been promoting it there and trying to get the word out, because there's no reason why it can't be global now, right? Palm Beach JavaScript and Boca.js.
Well, also anybody who's ever seen you teach wants to be here to see that. So.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming out today. So we typically do things, the doors typically open at 6:30, and that is an opportunity for mingling and networking. Since this is kind of hard, everybody talking over each other, I figured we open the doors at 6:30, and then we'll get started around 6:45, because I don't know. As funny as Damien is, I want to get to the content. I want to hear what this testing in Vuex is. So I just wanted to go over a couple of welcome and intros. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to Palm Beach JavaScript. Today we're going to be learning about Vuex and how to test it with TheVueGuy. If anybody is not familiar with Palm Beach Tech, say so now. Anybody not familiar with Palm Beach Tech and or not on the Slack channels? All right. Seems like not on the Slack. Okay, so go to palmbeachtech.org, click that Slack button, and sign up. If you're not on the Slack channels, there are several channels that you should be interested in. One is the developers channel. We have designers channels, and we got an events channel. Those are the three more active ones. The developers channel, come be a part of the community outside of these events. If you've got a question, if you're stuck on something, throw it in there. There's a bunch of people on there, and I guarantee you there's someone there willing to help you out. And if you see someone post a question that you might be able to help out in, it's a great way to give back to the community. Palm Beach JavaScript is a meetup for the people. So if you are currently learning something or you're excited about a particular topic or technology and you want to give a talk about it, please reach out to Damien or myself, and we will set up these events for you. So without further ado, today we are blessed to have TheVueGuy teaching us all about testing our Vuex store. Welcome. Take over, man.
Thank you. It's nice to be here for the first time virtually. It's my second meetup talk in Palm Beach, in the Palm Beach JavaScript group. Right before this whole madness with the coronavirus started, I went to the VueConf in Austin, and I was super lucky to be selected to do a lightning talk in the VueConf. So I really got the liking of, like Jeremy was saying, giving back to the community by sharing a little bit of the knowledge that we get on a day-to-day basis. That's what I'm trying to bring you guys and girls today with this talk about how to write tests for a Vuex store. I'm gonna stop my video and start sharing my screen. Stop the video.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second? I want to make sure everybody is aware of the Zoom chat features. If you have any questions, Damien and I are going to be monitoring that, and we will interrupt where possible. Otherwise, we'll have questions at the end. So write them down if you don't want to forget them. All right.
And also, you can interact individually between each other. If you want to ask a particular question of another person that's not the one that's talking, you can also do that. But feel free to make a public question. You'll have definitely our answers.
Absolutely. Joseph? You can also, I'm happy to be interrupted anytime during the talk, or if you want to wait until the end. I'm going to try to make it in less than an hour. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff today. But if you have like an urgent thing that needs to be answered right in the spot, just say something and we'll be happy to go through it. So like we were talking during the ice-breaking 15-minute section of the talk, Vuex is something that you should pick up early in your Vue development career. Reason being, like Jeremy was saying, it's good to at least know what it is and that it exists in order for you to make the right decision to use it on time, instead of building something without Vuex and just passing properties from father to children and then to a grandchildren. When you get to that chain of passing data to the bottom and then sending events again in a chain to ancestors, it gets very cumbersome at a point where it's just easier to use Vuex store and access the Vuex store from whichever component you want in your application. So I'm going to assume everyone here knows what Vue.js is. It's absolutely needed for this talk. And we're going to go through real quick over Vuex when we do the installation. So I already have the code for the application that we're going to be building today in a live coding session. And we're going to use it as like in an emergency case, in case we run into a super difficult roadblock we can go past. The idea that he had was to create a very simple app, right? Nothing related to UI, CSS. It's going to be ugly HTML because we want to focus on the store and how to test it properly. To do that, we need some data, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here for a very cool website called simpleapis.com. It's created by Jeremy. And
Nice.
so
Thanks
we're
for the plug.
basically gonna grab one of these APIs and create a website with it, a view application with it real quick. Again, not gonna do anything with UI or CSS. The one we're gonna choose today is the recipes API. If you click the API link, here you have an explanation of what the API is, but this is the juice. You can copy this URL, and what you'll get is an array of, it's a JSON response with an array containing multiple objects. Each object is a recipe, which has an ID, title, type of cuisine, prep time, calories, sugar. It has a bunch of cool things. So we're going to be using this in our application. Just wanted to give you a general overview of what we're going to be building. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to create this app, we're going to be using the Vue CLI. Let's create it right here. Gonna make this bigger. Can everyone see okay? All right,
Can you make it a
so
little bigger?
sure. I don't know why it grows so little, but there we go. So the Vue CLI command is just Vue. Once you install it globally on your machine, you have access to Vue. I think you can do Vue help. It's gonna tell you a bunch of things you can do. But to create a project, you just do Vue create, and we're gonna say the name of the project is gonna be a recipe example. You click enter, and then it's gonna give you like a step-by-step wizard on what features you wanna use. There is a default, but we're gonna manually select the features. We're not gonna be using JavaScript, PWA, not today. We don't really need a view router. It's gonna be a very simple app. We are gonna need Vuex for the store, not any CSS preprocessors. Not gonna use it in the linter. And ideally, you want to select this, but I'm not going to select it because I want you guys to use the project we're going to be using today, and include tests in your existing project. So we're going to be building an app just like if there are no tests configured, like nothing configured, so you can include it later on. You click enter. I want all the config in their dedicated config files. No, and Vue CLI is going to take care of creating the project for us. So what else? I already showed you the API link we're going to be using. And yeah, well, the main idea is we're going to build a Vue app that's going to show a list of these recipes. Again, no CSS, just an ugly HTML. And we're going to be able to filter to get recipes that has low calories, recipes that are easy to make, like with low cook time, and recipes with a specific cuisine, like Mexican recipes or Asian recipes. So the idea with the app in a broad overview would be, when the app is created, we're going to make a request to this endpoint using Axios, and the response from the endpoint, like we're seeing here, it's going to be saved in a variable in the state of our store. And from that, once we have all these recipes in the store, we're going to start to manipulate them, creating Gators, compute properties in our components to show them on the page. And once that's done, we're going to write a test for you to compare what we see on the screen, like on the browser, against the results of the tests. So it is done now. We can go to project, run the serve command. That's going to boot our application. Put these over here. And we should be able to go to localhost 8080. There it is. For IDE, we're going to be using PHP Storm. And let's open the project that we just created. It's called example or recipe example. Here it is. Open it. Okay, this is a brand new Vue project. It opens a README by default. We're gonna delete all these basic stuff that comes by default with the Vue installation. I'm gonna put the browser to the left and the IDE to the right so we can read both at the same time. Okay, so in the app.vue file, I'm gonna get rid of all the boilerplate. We don't need the hello world component. We don't need any styles. Now it's broken. And by the way, we're gonna stop this. And we're gonna open it here in Storm. So it's visible here too. How do I zoom in here? Can you see these just right? The IDE?
Can you zoom in just a little bit?
I'm trying to, but the Command Plus is not doing it. Let me see if there's a zoom option here.
Do you have the scroll wheel zoom? Hit Control and scroll with the zoom wheel.
Oh, there you go.
Let me try. No, it doesn't do anything either.
PHP Storm has a demo mode. If you go in the view menu, it'll bump up the font on everything.
Well, that's a little better because I was zooming in by doing like this.
If you open up your settings real quick and search zoom, it's a checkbox. So go to your Visual Studio. Yep. And type in zoom. Are you in Visual Studio? That doesn't look
No,
right.
this is Storm.
Oh. Never
Oh,
mind.
there it is. It's disabled.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then you should hit Control and
there we go. All right, so that looks better, and console looks better too. Let's make this a little bit smaller. So in the app, we removed all the boilerplate components. Let's remove these two. And type Palm Beach JS. I just want to see that on the screen. App.vue, let's see, main. That sounds about right. Let's run this again. Okay, there we go. So we have this, and now let's get to the butter. Here, we're going to call something when the app is created. First we need to install Axios. pm install Axios. It's going to allow us to make the asynchronous requests. And so when the app is created, we are going to make that call by doing Axios get, and we're going to copy the link here, paste it, and we're actually going to save the response here real quick. Oh no, that's not how it works. Axios returns a promise, so we need to catch the response here. And so we're gonna just console log the response. That should do is when the app loads, of course, if we import Axios here, when the app loads, it returns an array with data, and it has a bunch of things that are gonna make us hungry since it's dinner time. All right, so we don't wanna do this here. I just did this to make sure we were able to query the API and get the data. But in reality, when the app is created and you're using the Vuex store, you wanna dispatch an action. Let me do a quick segue to Vuex. So since when we created a project in VueCLI, we selected Vuex as an option in our project, it created this file for us, store.js, and it created an import in the main file to the store. So it created a store and it's importing that in our application here in our Vue instance. And what it does by default is it gives us, it creates a Vuex object and it gives us 3 sections to start writing things. It gives us a state, mutations, and actions. There's one extra called Gators that are something extra we can do. And what this means is in the state, again, I'm going to assume a little bit of knowledge in Vuex, but I'm going to do a real quick introduction. So when you're working with Vuex state management, you have a shared application state throughout all your Vue components. So
Jose, I don't mean to interrupt. Can you put the fonts bigger again? We had someone ask about that.
There you go. Thank
Please
you.
continue.
Let me put the chat here in the other monitor, just so I can read that. Okay, I have the chat here. So the main idea would be, for example, meetup, Palm Beach, JavaScript. So when you do this, you are creating a meetup that has a typo. You're creating a variable called meetup in your state. And now this variable is accessible throughout your application. You can go to any component, app.vue, or any child inside component or grandchildren. And if you just do this.store.state.meetup, then you have access to this variable you created here. If you create a children component and you say, for example, navbar, and now your navbar is another component, navbar.vue, you can access the same thing. You can do this store state meetup inside the navbar component without needing to pass data from one to the other or emitting an event from one to the other. Is automatically there for you in all the components because, again, it's being installed in your Vue instance when it's created. So it's already there for you. That's what the state does. Now, if you want to change the name or the value for the meetup variable that we just created, you can do like this is a store state meetup equals Boca.js. This won't work because the only way for you to change the state of the application is by committing a mutation. And a mutation is just a function that receives the state. Let's call change meetup. It receives the state, and then inside you can, this is not the right syntax, but you can mutate the meetup to be Boca inside the mutation. The mutations are synchronous. When you need to make asynchronous calls to an endpoint, or you know you're gonna be having to mess with time and set timeouts, then you enter the world of actions. Actions are things that execute things in your Vuex store, but they are asynchronous. So you don't know exactly when a result is expected, how long it's going to last. That's what actions are. And Gators, it's perfect. It's another function that you can create, and they're perfect for modifying the state of your application. So in our case, we're gonna have the recipes here in our state. It's gonna be an empty array, and we're gonna have a getter for low calories recipes. And what we're gonna do is just filter over the recipes array where calories are less than a threshold that we can specify. So that's what these fours are: state, mutations, actions, and getters. And like we saw, when you create a Vue project using the CLI, by default, it's gonna organize your store like this. And it's perfect. This is perfect to understand how it works and to get started with a small to mid-sized project. When you start to get into mid to large-size projects, even just having a basic Vuex store is not enough, and you need to start organizing your store in a better way, because you start to create modules. Is there a question? Create modules to organize your state. For example, if you have like a profile page and a recipes page and a message wall where people write stuff, you want to start separating those things into different files, so things don't get confused and it's all spaghetti code at the end on a large scale application. So when you start doing that, it gets really messy to put all your state in one object, all your mutations in one object, and so on. And the solution for that, the way to organize your store better, aligns perfectly to what you need when you want to test a Vuex store. That's what we're gonna go through right now. So what you do is you want to remove this file altogether, and we're gonna reorganize our store. It's now gonna be a folder called store, and now in your store you're gonna have one file, which is the index.js, which is gonna unify everything. But then you're gonna create one file for each thing. So you're gonna have one file for the state, one for the mutations, one for the actions, and one for the getters. And the index is the one that's gonna hold all the pieces together. The way how it does that is I'm gonna copy the stuff from the other project to be faster. This is the index. So what the index does is it includes Vue, starts Vuex, and it's gonna import everything else. It's gonna import the state, the mutations, the getters, the actions in here, and it's gonna wrap them up together, put a nice tag, and create a Vuex store with them. It's doing the same thing we were doing on a single file, but now we've separated the state, getters, mutations, and actions in their own files. This is awesome because now when you write the tests for your mutations, you can import the mutations file just like you're doing here, but you import this from your test file, and you're sure you're testing the exact same code that is in production or that's running your Vuex store. So there was a question, Zoom, but it went away. I don't know where the chat is. Font up. I'm sorry.
Font
I think
up, please.
Every time I create a new file, it goes back too small. I'm gonna try to remember that. Okay, so that's how you glue everything together. For the state, let's see How we put together the state is very simple. Oops. State here. We're just going to export an object with the recipes, and this object is going to be imported from the index that we just saw. Is it gone? Oh, I pasted this in the Gators. So this is the index. The Gators is not this. The state is just the recipes. Okay? This is imported here, and it's included in our Vuex store. Mutations, it look like our mutations is just going to be one. We're going to have one function called update recipes.
Configure.
Thank you. Update recipes. It receives the state of the Vuex store at that moment, the recipes that we want to update, and it updates our state recipes that we just created here. The actions are going to be like this. Let me get this in a second line. Actually, this. This is the action that we're going to have, get recipes. And I'm going to make this one change real quick. So get recipes is our main action for the application. What it does is it uses Axios to get the recipes like we did when we were creating the app. And then with the response, it's going to take, first it's going to check that there's data there by checking the length of the recipes array we receive. And if that's successful, then it's going to this is how you invoke a mutation in the store. And so it's going to invoke the update recipes mutation with that response from the endpoint, the API. So again, we use Axios to get the data from the endpoint. The response, we check the length of the recipes. If the length is greater than 0, we're going to call this update recipes function that we have in our mutations file. It receives some recipes which are going to be set in the store, and the payload, the recipes that we're passing is what came back from the endpoint. That's a general idea. If you want to request an endpoint, you call an action. That action invokes a mutation, and that mutation changes the state of your application. And now, once that's done, you have access to this recipes array everywhere in your app. You don't need to pass. If you didn't have the Vuex store, the alternative would be to create the recipes variable here as a data property in your app.vue file, and then start passing the recipes as a property to all the child components. Then inside the navbar, you will need to pass it again to the grandchildren and so on. Whereas here, you just do recipes and you have access to all that array. Now, the last piece is the getters. The getters is completely independent because since we're going to be altering the state, our state, which are the recipes, if the array is empty, it's not going to do anything. The filter is not going to return anything. But thanks to Vue's reactivity, when the recipes array gets filled by this action, then the getters are going to be automatically updated for us. And the first one we have is this one. The getters, again, are functions just like mutations are. And what these functions do is, in our case, very simply filter the recipes array. This one is low calories recipes. It receives the state as a parameter, and it goes through each one of the recipes, filtering. Well, it's going to actually filter in all the recipes where the calories are greater than 0 and less than 250. That's what I'm deciding are low-calorie recipes. I'm not a nutritionist or dietitian by any means. That's my definition. For the sake of the example, that's what we're gonna consider low-calorie recipes. And notice that we're exporting these functions individually, in contrast with the state, for example. Since the state is just one object, we export the state by default. But since we are going to have multiple getters, which are multiple functions, we export each one of them. Then from the index, again, reviewing the glue that holds everything together, notice how we import the state from the state file, because it's only one object. But we import everything from the getters, mutations, and actions, because there can be many different functions in each one of them. So that's it for the low calories recipes getters. We're also gonna have the easy recipes. It's again just gonna be a filter where the recipe cook time is less than 10. It takes less than 10 minutes to make that recipe. And the Asian recipes are gonna be another filter where the recipe.cuisine is Asian. Those are the three getters that we're gonna have in our store. Now we've been ignoring this error here. This is us. Okay, so we forgot one little thing, which is when the Vue CLI created a project for us, it assumed we had a store.js file. Thank you. It assumed we had a store.js file, but that's no longer true because we deleted it in order to create store index.js. So we just changed this. Since now the main store lives here, we save it and we're back here in business, but we have some errors. Can you make this bigger? So I can make this bigger, but
yeah, you got to do the same thing and make sure you're focused on the dev tools and hit Command+. It'll zoom in.
Awesome. So we're seeing some errors here, probably a typo. Let me refresh here. So the first one is his is not defined, definitely a typo in app.vue. Yeah, this is all test stuff. And we're not using Axios here anymore. Refresh, okay, no more errors. Now, we have our wonderful Vue DevTools, which we're gonna use to inspect our store. That's another awesome tool of on the DevTools. You can inspect the components of your application. We only have the app component, but it has this little nifty tab that switches to Vuex, and it lets you inspect the store in your app. So it's pretty cool. Right now, since the app is installed, we can see that the recipes array is empty, right? Because we are not yet dispatching the call to the endpoint. And we have all the getters, like I mentioned, since the state recipes are empty, all these filters are going to be empty as well. Now, if we trigger that action that I told you about, when the app.vue is created, then this is going to be magically filled thanks to Vue reactivity. And we do that by saying this store dispatch. That's how we dispatch an action. And we call the name of our action, which is get recipes. We do that. And there we go. We have 59 actions coming from Jeremy's website. They're all here. If we inspect this one, for example, it has 400 calories. It's an Italian main course. Not to get you guys hungry, but it is, what's the title? Chicken broccoli risotto. Nice. And there are 59 recipes, from which we have 6 are Asian. Can I make this bigger? Yeah. 6 are Asian, 15 are easy, and 9 are low calorie. And just to confirm, let's check the rest of the Asian ones. This is a teriyaki chicken, makes sense. This one is cashew shrimp, also makes sense. We're going to use this now to create a little nifty website. Again, like how much time we've gone. So we've used almost 40 minutes now. I'm just going to copy actually I'm gonna copy pieces of the app.vue file that I already have working. We're gonna review it little by little. So first we have a header for our recipes app. Make this smaller because this is gonna grow in a second. And here we're gonna add some filters, separate heading, and it's gonna be a, copy this. It's gonna be an on order list. So our filters are gonna be coming from an order list. And what happened here? The font size is killing me. Can you guys read if I make it a little bit smaller? Let's see, like this.
I was hoping you make it a little bit bigger. I want to see one character at a time, please.
Yeah. And with the button
Sure.
next. There you go.
Sure. Let's do it
That's
this
how I
way.
read my code. Love it.
Okay, if you can help me figure out.
No. Yeah. You can match that's already bigger. Go for it. Shrink it and you can see it.
All right. Refresh here. The error is unexpected token. Oh yeah, I haven't set any vModel here. So let me do real quick, and I'm gonna explain you what I'm doing. So the idea here to have checkboxes, right? Where depending on what you have checked, that's the filter that's going to be applied to the recipe. So initially it's going to be all, we're going to see all the recipes. And to do that, we right below the filters, we're going to show the recipes by another on order list. We're going to loop through an array called recipes, and we're just going to show it on list items. So where do the recipes are going to be coming from? Can someone give me a hint?
From the Gators?
Since we didn't create a getter for the recipes, we can access we can access the state directly. And we do that by creating a computer property in our app.vue component. And we're going to access these to store the state of recipes. We do that, now we're looping for all the recipes, and for each one of them is we have these filters selected. The way how the filters are going to be working is it's a variable called filter, and we're going to be adding 3 more for the 3 things we created in our store, which are going to be low calorie recipes is this checkbox, easy recipes this checkbox, and Asian recipes is this checkbox. If we toggle through them, it's not doing anything right now.
Jose, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is that considered access to access that top level store something normally you would do, or should you create a getter for the recipes?
I normally access the state directly for, in that particular example, I access the state because there is no real performance benefit from creating. I mean, I've done it. In some projects, I had created a getter for recipes, but it does the exact same thing. It would be
if you're not manipulating the data and you're just getting state as it is, it's okay to get it straight from state. Getters are used for something that you're going to need filtered or manipulated in some way.
Right.
The example and then the state too. So if the state is unchanged and you just want to represent it, then get it from state. If you need a subset of that data, then you create a getter and have the getter do the heavy lifting of getting you that substate.
Awesome, thank you.
And these for the getters are reactive. They variable in your state. But these, since they are reactive, they are recalculated if the recipes change automatically for you. You don't need to do anything. So if you create a getter for easy recipes, when the recipes change, these are going to be altered, and that's going to be sent to all the components that are listening to this getter. Compare that to if you did this operation in 10 different components, this operation would need to be run 10 times for each one of the components instead of just one, and passing the result to all 10 of them. So there's also a caching benefit on doing these operations here on the getters instead of in your components. But going back to your original question, this would be how you create the getter. And I mean, it works too, but for me, it's I would say more overhead, since you're not doing any transformations or converting anything to the state. All right, so getting back to the app, we created the checkboxes, and we're catching the selected value in this filter, the filter property. So when we toggle, this is going to change. And now we're going to use this property to access the getters. The way how we do that is here in the recipes, we're going to say, let me copy that to make it quicker. We're going to say if the filter is not all, which is the default here, then we're gonna access a getter with that particular name and return that. Otherwise, return all of them. Actually, this is not necessary. Well, yeah, because we don't have a getter for all of them. I'm sorry for the rambling. So that's the way it works. The filter, again, the filter variable is going to hold the checkbox that we're selecting. That checkbox is going to have these values which match our getters. And that way, whenever you change the checkbox, is going to access those getters for you and change the recipes we see on the screen. And that way now we have our fully functional prototype, beautiful, a lot of CSS, and we're going to leave it there here on the browser. Just for you guys to see that we have a working Vuex store with state, mutations, actions, and getters, and now we're going to go through the process of how we test it. Any questions so far on here before we jump into tests? Take the silence as a no.
I think we're good. Larry said ship it.
Ship it. I like it.
Well, I'm going to send you guys the link to the GitHub repo where all this code is hosted, in case you want to steal my intellectual property and put this awesome app out there.
Go into the recipe business. That's good.
Not paying Jeremy a dime for his API. So
sweet.
This is news to me.
At this point,
this is news to you. You said, is that what it is?
Yeah, Jeremy, what do you say?
This is news to me. I thought I was getting $1 million for this.
Well,
it's in the mail.
Yeah, exactly. It's another stimulus check for you. So I wanted to get to this point because I know this is an ugly app and very improvised, but you can think of your own Vue apps that you have developed with whatever structure, file, project management, plugins, libraries you want. If they don't have anything configured for testing, this is where we're going to hook the testing part in your applications, in your existing Vue projects. Vue, the Vue community, besides being awesome, they also make it very easy for you to include other parts of the ecosystem into your applications. In order to include the whole test ecosystem, if you want to test with Jess, which is what we're going to cover today, this is the command you would run. There's also the Mocha way, which is another testing framework. I haven't used it, so I can't compare. But Jess is awesome, and that's what we're going to be using. If you wanted to include Jess in your existing Vue project, this is all you have to do. Any library that starts with @Vue, it's from the Vue core team. It's an official Vue library. And of course, they're going to do an awesome job not only supporting and giving long-term support to the library, but also making sure it connects real well with any existing application that you have. So we're going to see how now, once we install this, it's going to create a test folder in our project with an example test already configured. One of the things, here it is. One of the things that is characteristic of test files is that they end in spec.js. Spec as in, what spec stands for?
Special? Spectacular? Is that what you said? I'm going to go with special.
It's because it's special. No, it's something.
Special.
I think a spec is how you, when you're specing something.
What is it?
I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure it's for a specification, like when you're specifying something. It's
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you, Enrique. I know there's also, you can change this spec with test. So if you're getting into some other projects and you see some files that end with test.js, that's also a test file. But by default, they need to end with any of the two, spec or test.js, in order for the test suite to pick up these files. So we don't want to use this example because that example was going to test the example component that came included by default with the Vue application. And this is not a strict guideline, but if you're going to be writing tests for your application, there's also a need for the test to be organized just in the same way we organize our store. And for that, we need to imagine that inside our unit folder, we need to map the spec files to whatever structure we have in our source file. So for this, we need to create first a folder called store. And inside the store folder, we're going to create a file to test mutations. And then we're going to create another one for the Gators and the actions. I'm not going to create them right away because it would trigger an error. Jess doesn't like empty test files. And we're only going to test those three because there is no point in testing the state. It's just an object. There's no function, no functionality to test here. And the index, there's also no point in testing this. The test world is a whole nother talk for maybe 4 hours of a meetup. The whole philosophy behind testing, like what to test, what not to test, where to spend your time, where not to spend your time, that's its own subject. In this talk, we're going to focus on the specifics, like the technicalities on how to test in Vue, particularly Vuex stores, but deciding what to test and what not to test, that's bigger fishes for us in this meetup talk. So starting by mutations, if we remember what mutations are, they are functions that are going to alter the state of our application. In our case, we start with an empty recipes array, and our mutation receives a new recipes array and replaces the one in the state with a new one it's receiving. So, and also the second important thing is this restructuring we did for a store. It's very beneficial for testing because now from within our test, we can import the exact same mutations that we have in our store. Whereas if we have the store.js file that initially came with the Vue project, it would be much harder to specifically import them. You would basically need to start calling each one of them manually. What are the name of the functions that you want to import here? This way is much simpler and straight to the point how to test. Now, also Jess is gonna provide to you a bunch of different functions and libraries and stuff to test your components. I'm gonna give you guys and girls some links at the end of the meeting if you wanted to read everything about Jess and how things work. But the way how you should start structuring your tests, your unit tests for Jess is by using describe. So with this keyword, you're trying to describe something in your project. What we're going to describe is mutations in our store. The only mutation we have is update recipes. So that's what we're going to describe. Describe is a function. So it has a name as an argument. And then as a second parameter, it's another function. This is some technicality you don't need to worry about. You just need to focus on we're describing this function and it is gonna do something. It's another function here. And so you also have to think your test as if you are writing sentences. So here, for example, update recipes, it's very straightforward, updates the recipe value in the state. But if, for example, you had a mutation that's going to increment the very often used example, the increment how many times a recipe has been viewed, you would have a mutation called increment view count for recipe. That's what you're describing, the name of the function, and then you would, in natural language, say here, it increments the amount of views a recipe has received. And we're going to see why this is important when we run the tests in a second. Now, inside the test, you want to assert something. And you do that by using another keyword from Jess called expect. And with expect, you want to make sure that something that you're expecting is actually the value that you're receiving. In this case, we're going to do a very simple expect called, we're going to expect the value true to be true. This is a test. if you wanted to describe something else in this mutation, if this mutation did two different things, or you wanted to write two different tests, you could write a second it here. So now you are testing two different things for the same mutation. So this is gonna evaluate it through, and I want to run that. We run that by doing npm run test unit. That's a way how it just checks inside the tests folder any file that ends with spec.js, and it's going to execute it. This is why I was telling you it's important to name the tests correctly. So here, imagine you have a suite of, in my real work, I have a suite test of only for the Vuex store of an application, it has almost 300 tests. So for each mutation, each action, and each getter, we have multiple its, and this is a very easy way to see what's failing, what failed, and exactly where. It's going to give you clues, very useful when you need to debug this. If we wanted to make it fail, of course, we can make this false, and it's going to throw us an error because we're expecting something to be true and it's giving us false. The way how it shows us that is like this. In the expect that we wrote, it's giving you in red what it received, and it's giving you in green what it expected. And that's the difference, what you need to fix. So going back to our real life example, this mutation of the recipes, let's review real quick what it does. It's a function, we're testing a function that receives a state. The state is an object, and recipes as a payload. And what it does is, inside the state, there is a value called recipes, and it's going to apply that payload that it's receiving. Actually, let me change this to payload. Just for you to, I'm not going to repeat recipes a lot. So the update recipes function receives a state as a parameter and the payload, and it knows that inside the state there is a variable called recipes, and it's going to apply the payload on top of that. That's what we want to test. The way how we do that is there's something that is used very often in when you're testing, which is mocking things, making up something to help you test your functions. In this case, we're going to create a little mock for our state. So instead of using, we could very easily use the state because it's very simple here, but in a big application where you have a very convoluted state with multiple variables, you don't really want to include your real state in your test. You want to mock it to only test the specific part that you are focusing on in this mutation. So for this, we're going to mutate the very same state. And we're going to say that our mock state is just an object that has an empty array for recipes inside. And here, then, we're going to call the mutations, which is what we imported. We know that inside this import, there is an update recipes function. We're going to pass it the state that we just mocked, which is the first parameter. And the second parameter, actually, to make it straightforward, this should be an array of recipes, but just to exemplify what we're testing, what should happen here is state.recipes should be foobar, right? And that's what I just said, that state.recipes should be foobar is exactly what we're going to explain in our expect syntax. So we expect that now state.recipe be foobar. And that's the test for our update recipes. A very, it's not a bad test because it's testing what we want, but it's not a real life example because you would never pass foobar here. But it's getting to the core of what the mutation does. If we run the test, failed, it expected, received undefined.
You're missing an S.
Oh,
Recipes.
Thank you. Who was that? Awesome. Thank you. So if we run the test again, there we go. It passed.
Is that Emily? Thank you, Emily.
Now if we change this and now expect Barbas, it's of course going to fail. And again, it's going to tell us this is what we expected. This is what was received. I made this as a string to be very straightforward, but let's make it a little bit more real. We know that in reality, of course, we're not going to pass this whole thing. We know this is what's going to be passed to the mutation, but we don't want to pass this whole object and put it in our version control. We're just going to mock a little bit, enough of it to allow us testing properly. So I'm just going to send a recipe, which is, I mean, the recipes array is just going to have one recipe, which is going to have a name of brownie. That's it. And so now it makes it even more straightforward to test because we know after running this mutation, the first element of the recipes array name should be brownie, right? If we run that, that's going to pass. And that way we are, I don't know the English word for this, but we're making sure that if anything changes in the implementation of this mutation, anything changes the core of what we're trying to do here, this test is going to fail. And that's going to notify us, and we're going to be able to act accordingly. These tests, these command that we're running here, I'm not sure how to run it on GitHub, but on my day-to-day job, we use Bitbucket for version control. And there is something in Bitbucket called pipelines. And you're able to tell your repo that whenever like a pull request is created or a new commit is pushed to the master branch or to any specific branch, you can ask Bitbucket to run this command. And if it fails, it's going to prevent any merges on your production branch, for example, master or whatever pipeline or workflow you want to work with. So this would be a very real life case scenario of how to use them properly. Any questions so far on the mutations before we jump to the getters? Take that as a no.
I don't see any in the chat room.
Okay.
And well, we have someone who says, Larry reminded us, it's GitHub Actions. And I think there's also GitHub Functions for what you were saying. But yes, fantastic use of those things.
Awesome. I'm going to check them out because the repo link I'm going to share after the meetup is actually hosted on GitHub. I'm curious to see if they pass the tests in the cloud and how it works. Now for the getters, I'm leaving the actions for last because that's what I find most interesting. The getters is going to be the same thing as the mutations, but with
just want to say we got
mindset.
about 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, so
okay.
Just to give you a time
limit. To copy and paste. It's going to get us there faster. Oops. So for the getters, again, we import all of them from the store, and we're going to fake our state. Here, I made it a little bit bigger because I wanted to test all of them with the same state. So here I created a brownie with this amount of calories, this cook time, this cuisine, and so on. And the first getter we want to test is the low calories recipes. And again, we use the describe function for it. So we're describing the low calories recipes getter, and we want it, or we know it's going to return recipes with less than 250 calories. That's the explanation in natural language. And what it does is even simpler than the mutation, because we don't need to trigger it because it's reactive. We just call the getters from the getters that we just imported. We're going to call the low calorie recipes one. Again, it's here. And it's filtering recipes that have more than 1 calorie and less than 250. And then it's very simple to test because we know our state, right? So let's count how many recipes have more than 0 and less than 250 calories. This doesn't go in, this doesn't go in, this one goes in, and this one goes in. So we expect the getter with this state to have only two elements, 2 recipes match those conditions. If we run the test again, we're going to see now 2 suites, one for the mutation, one for the getters, and they both passed. If there was an error, it would notify us on which suite it failed, sorry. And just to paste the other 2, the easy recipes returns recipes that take less than 10 minutes to cook. We're going to do the same thing, call the getter from the getters we imported, and it should have 3 recipes because there are 3 recipes that takes less than 10 minutes to cook that we created here. And same thing with Asian recipes. There's only 1 Asian recipe. For the actions, that's going to be another file. Oop, I'm writing on the wrong place. So for the actions, we need to import Axios, and we're going to import the actions. Let me make this bigger. We need to import the actions from our actions file. Jess has a very nice, don't remember the name of this, is something that hooks into the API of a library. In this case, it's hooking into the implementation of Axios, and it's going to mock Axios calls for us. So in reality, when you do this, after you run this line and you use Axios, it's not actually going to make a network request, but it's going to return you something mocked. So here we're describing our only action, which is get recipes. And what we want to test is what it does. And the only thing it does is it commits this mutation with the response from the endpoint. And to do that, we are going to mock the result value. Anytime we call Axios get, we're going to mock the result value to be this. So instead of returning this whole thing from the API, Axios is going to return this in our tests without making any network request. And this is something super nice called a spy. It's a function that you create from Jess called commit. And then you call your get recipes action. You put this before because it's an asynchronous function. It makes a request to an endpoint. Even though it's not actually making a network request, the mock function from Jess makes it asynchronous to maintain the implementation. And you create this action passing the spy function that you created. And I imagine it as a black box. So you don't know what happens inside the get recipes function, but you're sending a spy inside the black box. You don't know what happened inside, but you can only know what the spy tells you after the fact that it came back from the action. So when the spy came back, this commit function that we created, you can ask that spy what it was called with. So the spy is going to tell you that it's what it was called with this name and this payload. And it can also tell you that it was called one time. But it can tell you that the second to last time it was called, it used only one payload parameter. There are too many functions that can be used with Spec and spies that give you so many possibilities for testing actions with spies. And in this case, it's exactly what we want to test. We want to test that after you call the action, a commit was called with this name using this payload, which is what came back from the endpoint, and that it called only one mutation inside the action. And that's it. I'm going to now send in the chat. I don't know what's a better way to
put it in
the link out there.
The Slack channel. Everybody, that'll force
Slack
everybody to
channel,
get a Slack thing.
Okay.
So Larry had a question of, could this method of testing with Jess be similarly implemented with the single file components?
Yes. So I'm also gonna paste here the documentation for expect in Jest, where you're gonna be able to read all the different functions that you can use with expect. But if you go to the Jest documentation, like the parent one, you're going to see how to test view components. It's different because if you noted, what did we test today? Only JavaScript functions. In reality, we didn't test any view components, any view instances. In order to do that, to test .view components instead of .js files, you need to do something similar to what we're doing here by mocking state and mocking Axios calls. You're going to need to start mocking view components using something called route. So bottom line, it's different. The preparation of the test is going to be different, but at the end of the test, like what you're really going to use to make sure your components are working properly is the expect function. You're going to expect when a button is clicked in your component, an action was called. When the link was clicking your component, this string appeared inside a wrapper, for example. That makes
Does
sense.
that answer your question, Larry?
It does. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I do. It might be a little bit off. So when you ran the tests, let's see, that's gone. Okay, but when you ran the tests, you ran
and put it back.
Or view run test. I forget. It was a test : unit. Is there like a test : feature, or are there other types of tests that Jess can run?
You mean this inside the test folder? There's a unit folder.
In your no in your terminal down at the bottom when you ran npm run test.
Yes.
So is there what else could unit be? Is there a test : feature or?
No, in reality, the only reason why it's called like that, it's because the Vue CLI creates that command for you, test unit.
Okay.
And it seems to go into the unit directory there. I see that the units are all stored, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, you can also integrate Cypress for end-to-end test. There was another library for functional tests.
Okay,
and which one, sorry?
Mocha, I believe.
Mocha, I think it's another framework. It's something similar to Jest that helps you with these expect, with the spies and those things. But what Cypress is end-to-end, and there was another product for functional tests, which escapes my mind now. But I think I'm not sure. I'm gonna speak out of my league for this, but I think when you integrate those kind of tests, you would create another folder for end-to-end where you write the scripts that Cypress is going to run, or functional folder where you run the scripts that another product is going to run. And then you could create another line here to run those different tests for you, to let Jess run those tests for you. It's going to need more configuration, but that's a basic idea.
Yeah, the npm run in the scripts, you make up those names. So the fact that it's test:unit is arbitrary. It just happens to match up with the value side. So you can call it whatever you want, or you can integrate anything else that you need.
Yeah, if we call it
on the
test,
other side.
Yeah, if you install the Cypress, like Jose said, through the Vue CLI, it just creates another command just called test:E2E for end-to-end. So it's just their way of calling it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much, TheVueGuy, for coming out. I appreciate that. Any last questions before we wrap things up?
This has been awesome. I gained a lot from this. Thanks so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Hi.
So, Cecil.
I have a last question, but it's not actually related to testing. It's related to Vuex stores. Because, yeah, I wanted to know if any of you have used Vuex Persist and if it's actually worth it.
Vuex persist? No, I have not. Does it persist?
Yeah, it persists the states in any of the storages that you want. Yeah, you can actually modify the storage where you want.
No, but I think you just found the solution that I've been looking for a while. Thank you.
Oh, really? Oh my God.
With that, I mean, it serves a purpose, which is persisting your storage in your Vuex in local storage, but you need to be mindful that's anyone can take a peek inside your Vuex store if you have it in your local storage. So it's not that if you don't have it in local storage, people couldn't take a peek, but you make it more accessible to someone to sniff in your data. And if you're saving sensitive values in your Vuex store, that would be an even easier way for a malicious actor to get hold of your sensible data.
Yes, of course.
It does allow you to explicitly state which state you want stored in whichever method you're storing, local or session.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. I think it's worth it for some specific values that are not, that private, like something that you actually need to start your application, but they're not like passwords or something like that. That would be crazy. I just wanted to know if some of you had experience, because actually right now we're having of course a Vuex store and at my work, and I wanted to see if anyone has experience implementing this like at enterprise level or something like that. Thank you very much. Thank you for the help.
And Jose, do you have experience with that, or Larry, you had some good ideas about that?
I did. The one and only SPA that I built when I was discovering Vue and Vuex and all this other ecosystem, I wanted to persist token data. I was trying to figure out this new way of getting around sessions, because I don't have sessions anymore in an SPA. So I wanted to persist the token, whichever token method I was going with, whether it's JWT or otherwise. And the quick and easy way where I started to see, I want to store multiple items from my state into the local storage, and the token being one of them, as well as a few other things. So I did serialize the entire state into the Vuex item that got stored into local storage using the persistent, the Vuex persisted state. But that started to go wrong. It's a bad idea to just blindly store everything. But I did store, once I started filtering it out, I just stored the token and a couple of other things. which did make it easier, so I wouldn't have to manually listen for any changes and then store those back to the local or session storage. I guess that's it, really.
There is also one more extra spicy item I want to add. I don't have experience with Vuex persist, but I do have experience with Firebase. It's a product from Google. It's a real-time database that uses sockets to update, like any client, any browser that connects to Firebase automatically downloads what Firebase has. Firebase has a very nice plugin for Vuex. So you can plug your Vuex store to a Firebase real-time database, and then your Vuex store is not only persisted, it's not persisted locally, but it's persisted in the cloud, and it's shared. It can be shared among different clients. So that would be a nice way to distribute a state that is meant to be client, distributed for different users. If you're trying to build a multiplayer game, for example, that would be a perfect use case for it. If you update, if you make a mutation to the state locally on your machine, it goes to the Firebase cloud, and any client that is listening to that store gets that mutation automatically on their computer, on their state.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the great question, Andy. One of the reminder to everybody, I did mute you guys for the purpose of Jose being able to present and us not hearing the dog or my daughter walking in and talking. But feel free to unmute yourself for any questions. This is the best time to do it. Otherwise,
I do have a follow-up from last meetup's talk where I was talking about Vue and TypeScript. So Vue 3 is about ready to launch. They're officially in the beta versions. As far as I understand, Vue is done. The reason why they're not releasing it yet is because they have a wide ecosystem that they're trying to maintain and bring up to speed with all of the new features, documentation, the Vuex, the Vue router, things like that. But Vue itself is done. And one of the items that I brought up that was a pain point for me learning or getting TypeScript to work inside of a Vue template is it didn't type check anything. And that Cecil brought up that this was something that Vueter might be able to handle. And in the Vue 2 world, it doesn't handle that. But in Vue 3, with the way the internals are changing, Vueter is being updated as well to gain the benefit of Vue 3. And type safety will happen in the template language as well. So that's something I'm super excited about. I don't know when that's going to come out though. It's been coming out for, next quarter for 5 quarters, I think. So it's on its way.
So it should be out the next quarter then.
All right.
That'll always be the case. Hey, do you know if that next version, one of the things that being from the Angular world is that we have to always worry about, which browser will be deprecated. Do you know if Vue is announcing any deprecation as far as no longer supporting IE7?
Well, they've never supported that. I think they've only gone down to 11, and I think there will be 11 compatibility build, and that will affect how you build with Vue as far as like what it needs to do. One of the bigger features that's being in there is its reactivity system is using proxies. And that allows you to dynamically add and remove things to an array and an object and get the benefits of a reactive system. Beforehand, the way it has to be on just a normal object, it's harder to do on an object or impossible to do on an object and hard to do in an array. So there will be little caveats like that where IE11, you'll have to write in this slightly different way. But I think it will be more down to the compiler, like how Babel does its, what browsers do you want to support, and it'll figure out the polyfills for you if necessary. But a full TypeScript support is coming, and the template type validation is going to be there, and Vueter is going to be the one that's going to handle that. That's the update that I had from last time. Any last questions?
If we want to follow follow you on Twitter or Facebook or
TheVueGuy.
TikTok? How do we do that?
And if you have any question, you can send that to me over Twitter, or I always have the Slack open with Palm Beach developer channel in there. I'm as TheVueGuy. That's my handle in the Slack channel as well. If you're shy to ask a question or tomorrow something came to mind, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'll be happy to help.
Sounds good. Just a final reminder, everybody, the Slack channel that we're all talking about. Of course, we've answered the question of how to get to it earlier on and on the chat, but you can go to Palm Beach Tech. This is Palm Beach JavaScript, but this is palmbeachtech.org/Slack for that Slack, and then join us in the Pound Developers channel.
You said Schlide up.
Schlido?
You said Schline up.
You can Schline up on the, and you can Pound Developer us.
All right, this is getting awkward. Thanks, everybody.
What? Why do you do that?
I don't know.
I thought that was a hashtag. Yeah, we're losing people already. I think
They're dropping.
I think that means it's time to go.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. See you guys next month.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. I guess we should have asked if they want what suggestions you guys had for the next one.
Oh, I'll hit up a lot of people. And Brandon King looks like he's got something coming up. Whoa. I think I made him nervous.
Next time, my friend.
All right. Take care, everybody.
See you guys.